Hey everybody, thanks for sticking around for this part 2 of the Premiere OnScript video on modifying effects that we have applied to our clips in the active sequence. This movie is going to be solely based around a project script that I wrote that syncs effect settings across clips on any given track. And I'm just going to walk through the script that I have so that you can see how modifying these effects could get used in a real world situation. Now, before I get into the script here, which comes down and it looks like this, we have a couple of functions in here, and the main script is right up in here. First, I want to go in and show you again what this guy does. So I have this other sync effect timeline down here that we'll jump into, and I'll just show you what I have here. Say I have this first clip and I want it to have the same effects as these next two clips. Maybe it's from the same source file. Maybe I just want them all to have a certain feel and I want that to be the same through color or a crop. Maybe I want it to have really cool letterbox effects in here with the top and bottom crop. But then I set that setting and I jump over here and, well, that letterbox is not there anymore. That letterbox is different over here because it's at 5% on this clip, it's on 10% back at this clip. And say I had a bunch of settings, I wouldn't want to copy those through to all of them, because if I, copy, just Control C and copy this clip settings and then come over here and paste the attributes, what I'm going to see is then in this clip, I'm going to have a lumetri color effect, a crop effect, and that's not what I want. I want those effects to sync up rather than to just be duplicated, because then, lumetri on top of lumetri, we don't want to mess with that. So I'm going to delete those and get back to where we were, where these guys have 5% crops on the top and bottom, and this guy does not. He has a 10% crop, and maybe I want to throw in a little extra vignetting on it and make it look like a cool island shot out here. And I want to sync that up. What the script is going to do is just that. It's going to target the selected clip down here. And so long as these clips also have like the same settings, it'll just sync those up. So if we come over here, we can see that we have that vignette and that letterbox crop on the top and bottom that are all synced up. If we want to make that even more wild, because we jump over here and these, are crazy. And hey, let's just throw like a rotation on this because we want to get real weird and experimental, and then like scale it up to like 125. Let's just do all this stuff and see how easy it is to just copy those attributes over to the next clip. Might take a minute to load because now we're processing a little bit more. And the screen cap software is also running, but there we go. Now this is going to bug me the rest of this movie if I don't change this back. So I'm just going to switch this stuff back and we'll sync it back up and get into the script. So make sure those are all synced. Yep, looks good. Looks good. Okay, let's jump into this script and talk about what we have going in here. So I'm going to start off really easy. We're going to start off with variable active seek. Just target the active sequence so that I don't have to write this little string over and over and over again. Then I want to target the clips in that active seek. I'm going to go activeseek.videotrack0.clips. Now for this instance of this sync settings script, I'm just syncing the settings across this first track. Any clip that's on track 0 is going to be synced up. Now you can do this in different ways. Once you see how the full script works, you can set this to sync up based on clip name or do it throughout the entire timeline. You can do it based on whatever parameters you want. But for this example, it's just easier to show you guys with a single track. So we are going to be syncing everything along this very first track. So here we go, clips, active seek, video tracks 0.clips. Next, I'm going to make an effect array, which is going to be what stores the effects that I have on my selected clip and transfers it over to apply it to the effects that are on my unselected clips that are on that track. And then I'm just going to make a variable target clip. So now the first thing that we have to do in this script is we have to go through and first off find the clip that we're targeting. What settings do we want to, copy out throughout all these other clips? Well, what we're going to do for that is we're going to make a for loop. Variable a equals 0. A is less than clips.numItems, which is going to be the number of clips on this first track. As long as a is less than that number, we're going to say if clips index a is selected is equal to true, then we're going to set this target clip variable that we declared up here to clips a. Basically, that's easy enough. Just going through this first track, if anything's targeted, it's going to set it to target clip. If nothing's selected, then it's just going to go on and the script's not going to do anything. All right, so the next step we want to come down to is this grab effect info target clip. So what this is a function that I wrote that's down here, and we're going to pass in the target clip that we want it to target. So we just set this target clip right here, right? We have it, we declared it, we set it. Now we're passing it into this function, and let's go down to this function, which is down here, grab effect info with the argument in here, clip. So what am I going to do in here? First thing I'm going to do is I'm going to declare a new array, and this is going to be declared outside of the first for loop because I wanted to have scope that covers this entire function. So I want it to exist throughout the entire time that I'm running this function. From up here all the way down to the end where I'm going to push it into the effect array that we created up here. Back into it, we are creating a array, calling it single effect, and it's going to be empty. Then I'm going to do a for loop. And in this, what we're going to do is we're going to take the clip that we just passed in here, target the components.numItems, and then b++ at the end of that for loop. And inside that, what I'm going to do is make single effect empty again. Set it to nothing. That way, if we're going through loops and single effect gets filled up, when it starts a new iteration of this loop, it's going to zero out that array. Then what I want to do is go into single effect, do push clip components b display name. This is just going to add in the display name of our very first component, and then our second component, and then our third component into this single effects array. But each time we go through this loop, this is going to get zeroed out. So basically, we're kind of starting new every time. Now, once I have that display name, I'll know that in this single effect array, index 0 is going to be the display name of that general effect, right? So now what I'm going to do is come down and do a for loop through the properties. So clip components b properties.numItems c++, just a for loop. And I'm going to make a variable called property and go clip.componentsb.propertiesc. So now we're getting into all these letters. It's getting kind of confusing. All this is doing is targeting our current component and the property that we're seeing in our C for loop iteration. So now that I have this as a property, we remember when we were in the previous video going through the Lumetri color effect properties, and we can see them right here. There's all these weird blank ones that we don't want to mess with. And reading from them is useless. Writing to them is even more useless because you'll get errors back. So we don't want to mess with those. So first we're going to test if this property variable, property.displayName, is not equal to nothing, which I think that's a double negative, but it's a little confusing. Basically, as long as the display name is not nothing, we're going to go through and we're going to try to do stuff with this property. And here we're going to call try and then make a variable value, property.getValue, and then single effect push value. So we're going back up to the single effect array, which already has the component name in there, the general effect name at index 0, and we're adding in the property value that is a certain distance away from that effect name. Because if we look in at this and we look down at Lumetri color and say we were doing it with, let's just say we're doing it with this crop. We're going to get index 0 as crop, and left is always going to be 1 away from crop. Top will always be 2 away from crop. Right will always be 3 away from crop, and you get the picture. It's always going to be a certain number away from the display name up there. That way we will always know what to sync the settings to as we jump over to different clips. So back to this. you're going to see this right here, this try catch area. And that's because right here we're testing to see if this display name is nothing, and we don't want to grab those values if the display name is nothing. But also sometimes you'll try and get values of certain properties and you'll also get errors on those. And that's just, the whole part of this effect API being kind of weird. So I'm going to put this try catch code in here. That way, if when we go property.getValue, it does return something weird that is an error, which happens a lot more than you would think with doing this stuff. Then when we get that error, we're going to go to the single effect array, and rather than pushing in a property value, we're just going to push in a dash. Now here's an alert that we'll come back to a little bit later. But after that, I'm going to just put continue. That way the script just continues running. Now down here, I'm also going to put single effect.push for a dash. And this is the else statement for the if statement we have right here, if property display name is not equal to nothing. You can see that here if I twirl that down. So now either way, if the getValue function returns an error or if the property display name returns nothing, we are going to take that spot in the single effect array and push in one of these little dashes. That way in the future we can test for that dash and know whether or not we want to set a value in the future. And then after all of this is done, we'll twirl that back down. There's one more line of code down here. And you can see that this is living inside of this first for loop. Once we're at the very end of this first for loop, the last thing that we're going to do is take effect array, which we declared outside of this function, way up here. And what we're going to do is we're going to push in the single effect array that we've created in here. Now, in this way, what we're doing is we are creating an array within an array. And we can see this right here, that the way you would access something inside effect number 1, property number 0 here, and we'll look more into that in just a moment, is we have this double layered array that can just store a lot more rich information. And now we have a linear list of the effect name and every single property that's value we can get after its name. And this is going to be really valuable to us as we go to sync our information. And so it's going to go to effect array.push single effect, and then it's going to loop back up to this B for loop and reset that single effect and do everything all over again. So just to show you guys sometimes where this error will come up where you try and get a value and it doesn't work, I'm going to bring up this alert right here where it says ran into a hiccup with property.displayname, and we'll see how many times we catch an error. And I'll come in here and just comment this out so we don't jump into the next function, and we'll just run this really quick. All right, so think about the Lumetri color effect that we have over here. These are all the different properties that we are going to run into a hiccup with if we're doing that try catch error code. Okay, that's nothing, that's nothing, that's nothing. There's an error with all these nothings. There's an error with embedded LUTs, error with media embedded LUT type, LUT blob. Okay, so we ran through Lumetri color and we brought back, I don't know, there were probably like 9 errors in there. But that's just to go to show you guys that if you don't do this try catch, you can't catch everything with this display name thing, and you'll get a bunch of errors. So it's just a lot easier to do this try catch, and everything will work just fine. So now that we've gone through this grab effect info function, I'm going to twirl that up, get that out of our way, and we'll come back up here. Now we've grabbed effect info from the target clip, and we've stored that info into effect array. What's left to do? We have to loop through the rest of the clips on our track, and we have to sync up the effects. So in order to do this, let's just start doing a for loop. We're going to loop through clips.numItems, just looping through the clips on this track. And then we're going to go var effects equals clips.a.components, and we'll loop through the components. So we're going to the first clip, to the second clip, to the third clip, and then starting to loop through the components. After our B loop, where we are looping through the components, we're going to do a for loop with variable C and start looping through effect array. So we're now looping through this effect array. And what we're going to do is we're going to compare clips_a.components, this effects variable, index B to its display name. So if we jump in and we know that effects 0 is going to be opacity, we're going to compare that display name to effect array C0. And what this is we're going through this C loop and we're going through each one of those first level array entries, which in itself also is storing an array. So we can put this index 0 after that, and we will always get the display name of the effects that we're storing back in this grab effect info function. Now, if that display name from the current looped clip matches the display name of one of the effects from our targeted clip, we're going to go in and run the function sync settings because obviously we're doing something right and those two effects line up. Now, what we're going to pass into there is effects B and effects array C. So we're going to pass in an entire array here. Effect array C, because it's a dual layered array, is going to pass in an entire array, and effects B is just going to give us the clips_a.components with an index value on the end of it. So it'll give us our target effect. Now let's jump down into the sync settings function, which is a little bit easier than our grab effect info function. We're going to pass in the effect and we're going to pass in the settings as our arguments for this function. And we're going to do a for loop. This for loop is going to loop through the properties of our targeted effect. And what we're going to do is say if settings, so effect array C is going to be settings, so if settings with an index of I plus 1, because we have to add 1 to it because the very first one of effects array is going to be the display name, and we don't want that. We want to target the first line of effect properties in the effect array, which is going to be I plus 1. If settings I plus 1 is not equal to a dash, that dash is what we stored if we got a blank effect display name or an error from that effect get value function, then we are going to try effect.properties_I set value to settings I plus 1. And then we are going to pass a 1 right here because this 1 can be interchangeable with the true Boolean that we had up in our examples over here. When we are going in and getting a value and then setting a value, we were passing it true. True saying to update the Premiere UI. You can also just pass a 1 in there, and that will achieve the same thing. Now, sometimes we're still going to have weird things happening. Sometimes I was still getting on certain effects that got past my filtration in the grab effect info area. I was still getting errors when I was trying to set the value for some. So I also here put a try and a catch error in order to make sure that I wasn't getting held up in my script. And I haven't run into any major issues where I was like, oh, weird, I set some settings over on this clip and they didn't copy over to this one. That must have been an error. I haven't, really ran into that at all because all of the effects parameters that I'm changing up here are really simple. They're the ones that you see as values and numbers, and they're none of those really complex ones. So you might run into it, and I'm sure if you use the script a lot, that'll happen at some point. This is just a way to keep that script running smoothly. So if we put these alerts down, we can just see this whole thing run in action. It'll tell us the effect name, that effect display name, and then it'll come in and tell us the property, and then the attempted value that it's trying to set. And then down here, we'll see the errors coming back if it wasn't able to set that value. So let's just run this really quick. I'll come in and we'll change this crop to something weird. And in Lumetri color, we'll also come down and change the vignette to a nice bright white light and set that midpoint really in there. And we'll sync these effect settings. We got that clip selected and we're going to run it. And now we see effect name opacity, property opacity, attempted value 100. And it runs and we don't get this error alert, so it must have set it properly. Now blend value, attempted value 18. I'm just going to click through these so you can see until we run into our first error. Crop did just fine. Now we're in Lumetri color. This is where we're going to start seeing some weird stuff happening. And there we go. It's just going to run us through every single property that we pulled from the effect settings of this clip right here. And it's just going to be running through and setting them to every clip on the track. And you can see that we're not getting any errors right now, which is nice. We're not triggering this error catch right here, which means that we must have done a pretty good job filtering out the unwanted settings that were going to cause errors in the grab effect info clip function that we wrote earlier. After that, I just end this thing with continue. I need to stop the script, I guess, because I want to comment this out. And just to wrap things up, we'll run that and it'll sync these settings. Show you one more time. This script is really great, works really well. And I'm learning to really enjoy using it. And I can just imagine, building it into a little panel that just kind of sits right over here or right over here that I can just click and sync up settings, for an ultra key. If I'm keying and I need to update a key, or color, I feel like it's just going to be super useful in color scripts and wanting to give it a consistent style. I'm really looking forward to using this script in the future. I haven't used it too much yet because I actually made it for this video, but I can really see myself using it a lot. I hope you guys find that helpful too. We're reaching the end of this video. I had taken a month off from doing videos, and man, I came back and gave you guys like a 45-minute two-parter. So next time I'll try and keep it a little more reasonable, down to a short, 10-minute learning point about scripting in Premiere. But if you've stuck around for the whole thing, I really appreciate it. Thank you. Give me comments if anything goes wrong, comments if anything goes good. I appreciate it all, everybody, and I'll see you in the next video.